Well, hello again. Here's a silly story of not paying attention. I lost my boat in the middle of the night. Lost it in the fact I couldn't find it. My wife and I cruised for 14 years all around the Caribbean, Central America. Not once in that time did I ever lose my boat as trying to find it on my way home from an event or being over at someone else's boat. And we didn't have any navigation, and just jump into the inflatable and, go over and have a party with somebody or go to an event and come home again. Well, a little 28-foot boat I took down to the Caribbean by myself. I had spent a lot of time on that boat by myself. There weren't too many other boats around, and weather was coming, so I ended up in a big harbor, and this harbor was a couple miles by a couple miles. It's a very secure place to be in bad weather. So sometimes you just get there, and I'd been on that boat for, I don't know, probably close to 2 weeks by myself. It was getting very old. I'd watched pretty much all the movies I had. The boat's constantly moving because even though I was in a nice big harbor, it was still choppy to be in that little boat. So I was in town, and I ran into another boat that had came into the harbor. There was a guy and two young ladies on the boat, and they were delivering the boat from the Caribbean up to the States. Hopefully that chainsaw is not too loud. But anyway, I had talked to them, and they're like, hey, why don't you come over for cocktails around 4 o'clock or so? And I'm like, sure, I'd like to be around some people. So I went over and just to shoot the crap with them. It's, you talk about the stuff you do and where you've been and blah, 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 and one cocktail leads to another and leads to another, and then the girls are making dinner, and they're like, hey, why don't you stay and have dinner with us? And I'm like, sure, that sounds like great, it's some more socializing. So I sat there and had dinner with them, and I guess it was probably 8 or 8:30, and I decided to head back to my boat. I didn't have any anchor lights on. Sometimes in anchorages like this one was so big, nobody moved around inside of it at night like any big boats or anything like that, because there were too many shallow spots in it. So running around in a little inflatable is one thing, but running around in a large boat. So when I had left, it was daylight, and I didn't have any kind of automatic systems to turn the light on after dark. But the guy's like, well, you're not going to try and go home tonight in the dark, are you? And it was a semi-cloudy night, so there weren't any stars or anything. And I'm like, yeah, it's not a problem. I said, I'm just going to run, it's basically between your boat, and there was maybe a city dock another half mile past my boat. And I said, it's a straight line. I said, I'll just navigate between the lights and run down to my boat. I said, it shouldn't be an issue. So I jumped into Zodiac, and I take off, and I get maybe a quarter mile from him when I lose electric spark to one of the 2 cylinders. And I'm running an old antique Evinrude. And I liked them because they had 2 separate electrical systems on them. They were independent. They had a coil, points, and a condenser for each one. And if you lost one of those components, it would still run on 1 cylinder. And that's exactly what happened. So it's not a big deal, but it slowed my pace down from, doing 15 or 20 miles an hour to about 5 or 6 miles an hour. And I was maybe halfway back to my boat when the boat I just left decided to turn all their lights off. And they were my other line of sight, that if I have 2 points and I can see one behind me and one in front of me, I can basically run a straight line. When you only have 1 light in front of you, nah. So things got challenging. And I'm driving around, and I'm working towards that light, but I have no reference behind me. And at some point I went past my boat. It was dark, I couldn't see it. And I got closer into the town dock, and I knew, okay, I shouldn't be that close. And I went back out, and I went back around. And I guess I'm starting to think, all right, I guess I'm going to sleep in the Zodiac tonight. I've got an anchor. I carry that all the time with me. I've got an anchor and lots of line just for things like this happening. And I got water in the boat. I'm just not real happy because I'm going to have to sleep in my Zodiac tonight. And I was expecting to go home to a nice soft bed. So I guess it's about 3.5 hours later. I come cruising around, and I'm looking for anything, and I actually see a boat. I can see it in the darkness. I'm getting close, and I'm like, oh my God, there's somebody else out here besides me. And I knew there were a few boats out there, and I have no idea. Again, at 3.5 hours, I'm completely lost in the bay. I have no idea. And I get up behind this boat, I look at the name of it, and it's the boat I left. And it's been like at least 3.5 hours I've been driving around in the dinghy trying to find my boat with zero success. So they're all sleeping by this time, and I'm knocking on the side of the boat, and they're like, "Who's out there?" I'm like, "Hey, it's Derek. I'm out here and I'm lost, man. Can you help me out?" So the guy comes back on deck, and I explain to him my situation. He's like, "Oh man, just come in the boat. I have an extra bed here for you." I said, "I got a better idea." I said, "Turn your anchor light on and leave it on until I call you on the radio from my boat and let you know I make it back." I said, "Worst case scenario, I can find your boat in the dark and come back here." But I said, "If you just leave your anchor light on." When I had left his boat, I had left in a Zodiac that was running, the way it should. I could get up on plane and make the thing run. But he thought I was already home, so he turned his lights off. So once he turned his lights back on, it was a pretty easy trip to get back to my boat. And I tell you what, I was glad to get back on it. I was happy to be bouncing around on that for the night instead of sleeping in a Zodiac underneath it wasn't really stars, it was mostly overcast clouds. So, and the only other time I ran into something like that was I had a friend in Florida, we call him Captain Ed. And Captain Ed is a piece of work. He deserves his own interview, that man. He's something of a character. I met him and his wife. They were living out on the dock when I was back there working one time, making some cruising money. But he had told us about this thing called the Columbus Day Regatta, which is down in South Miami. And this is back in maybe mid-90s or something like that, late 90s. Before, I guess they've sort of come in and policed everything now, but at that point there was very little that went on. It was basically an open party for Columbus Day weekend. So he had told me some things about the events, and he was making up some like triangle type flags, and they were multicolored, looked like the LGBT XYZ flags that they're flying now. Sorry, I'm not politically correct on all that stuff, but anyway, he's making up these big long banners, I guess you want to call them. And I didn't quite know what he was doing. And then one day a box shows up, and he's opening up the box. He's got a little warehouse out in front of the marina where he's at, where he worked out of. And I'm like, "What's in the box, Ed?" He said, "Beads." I'm like, "Beads?" And he starts pulling out Mardi Gras beads. And I'm like, "Okay, Ed, what's the Mardi Gras beads for?" He goes, "Oh, you're going to find out." When I said this is a big party, it's a big party. So we sail down to South Miami. He's on his boat with his wife, and I'm with mine. And we raft the boats up together, where we tie them up together. And there are literally like 1,000 boats there. I mean, there's sailboats, there's power boats, there's people in small runabouts, there's people in dinghies. It's a sea of boats. And he walks over to me, and he hands me one of these big colorful banners. And again, it's like just a triangle. It's, I don't know, 20 foot long. He says, "Put that up at the top of your mast." And he put one on his, and I put one on mine. And I'm just looking at him like, okay, why? Well, we take off in our Zodiacs, or inflatables. I refer to them as a Zodiac. We take off in our inflatables, and we're out enjoying the party. And it is just a wild party. And there's beautiful women everywhere in bikinis. And then you see what the beads are for, show me your... So yeah, the beads are flowing, the booze is flowing and everything, and it's like my wife and I want to go back and grab something to eat, and you start looking around, and there's boats everywhere. I mean, there's sailboats everywhere. There's just like, "Where's my boat?" Ah, there's my boat. If we had those colors up today, they would have guessed we were the trans boat or whatever they call that stuff now. But yeah, they look like the LGBT XYZ flags. But yeah, we would have definitely been lost there. And he knew about it because he had been lost there one time. He said it took him forever to find his boat. So he made sure to go ahead and put something up so he wouldn't do that again. So yeah, those are the only 2 times I've lost my boat. And the second time I didn't lose it, but I would have definitely had a long ride looking around everything to try and find it, because they just all look the same. But yeah, the night in the Bahamas in the harbor, that was an interesting evening. So anyway, try not to lose your boat, and it makes life a lot more enjoyable. Cheers.